Today's Groundhog Day, and I selected this news conference for today because if you watch the Groundhog Day, the movie obviously is a repeat day after day after day, same message. And we have the same message that I want everybody to keep in mind for the next 90 days as we head up for the May 10th primary. And that message is that 40% of Hall County voters have a different polling site for 2022. Now is the time to find your polling site, and you can do that through Nebraska Voter Check. So again, 40% of Hall County voters will have a different polling place in 2022. Find your polling place at Nebraska Voter Check. 40% of Hall County voters will have a different polling place for 2022. Find your polling place at Nebraska Voter Check. Why do we have so much substantial change here for 2022? This is really a direct result from the census numbers that came in for Hall County, and it's due to redistricting with new political lines that have been drawn. It's very substantial change, and in the coming days, weeks, and months, voters are going to hear this repeat message that we'll be sending out, that polling places have changed, and we want people to get their polling place found now before the election so they're confident where they're going to go. The easiest way to find this polling place is to go online to Nebraska Voter Check, and we have the website listed here for Nebraska Voter Check, or you can just Google Nebraska Voter Check and it will come up. Voters may look up the new polling place either by their name or their residential address. And I have an example of the Nebraska Voter Check over here, and we can look at that when I get done showing you the maps and talking about this. It's also available in different languages. They can look it up in English or they can look it up in Spanish on the website. Maps showing the new precinct boundaries are available also online at our Hall County website. We have an address lookup right on the front page. People can put their address in and it will tell where their new polling place is. Physical maps are also on display because I know not everybody has access to a computer. So we have this map here at the Hall County Administration Building. If you live in Grand Island, you can see maps at Grand Island City Hall, at the Grand Island Chamber of Commerce, at the Grand Island Public Library, at the Multicultural Coalition. If you live in Cairo, the Cairo Village Hall has a map. If you live in Alda, you can go to the Alda Village Hall. In Wood River City Hall and their community center has a map. If you live in Donovan or in that area, Donovan Village Hall also has a map at their event center. So there's plenty of information available in the community for people to be looking now and finding out now where their new polling place is. Also, if there are any businesses that would like to have a copy of this map, if they want to put it up in their break room, we're happy to provide a copy. If there's a doctor's office or someone with a waiting room, a hairstyling salon, whatever, anybody that wants a map, if they'll contact our office, we can get a map to them so that people can be getting this information. This change will affect more than 13,000 Hall County voters, and it will be in place for the next 10 years. So voters have time now to get prepared to be confident where they're headed on Election Day. The bulk of the changes were brought about from redistricting from the 2020 census. Grand Island now has 3 legislative districts. Hall County had 3 legislative districts before, but they didn't cut the city proper into 3 different sections, which they do now, instead of 2 that we had before. Legislative lines are hard boundaries when it comes to voting. The precinct boundaries for each polling place cannot cross a legislative boundary. So one of the most significant changes that we have here is that some of our Grand Island voters are now going to be in the Alda precinct, which means they will be voting, their polling place will be in Alda. And that legislative line is on Shimmer. You can see here, Precinct 3. Grand Island city limits comes south of Shimmer, but the legislative line is on Shimmer. So these people are now in Precinct 23. This will be the first time that I can think of, at least the last 30 years, that we will be sending ballots with Grand Island Mayor's race, some Grand Island School Board to Alda. So that is going to be a big change. A similar legislative line was drawn around the Central Nebraska Regional Airport, around city limits. We had been working to move a lot of these rural voters to voting at the airport. The legislative line now surrounds the airport, so we cannot use that as a polling place for these voters in northeast Grand Island. Instead, we have selected Resurrection Church. Now that may not make a lot of sense because they're actually going to have to drive by other polling places to get there. But what happened with the legislative line moves also is that Northwest school voters that were on the west side of Engelman have been cut apart or divided from Northwest school board members here. And we have some Northwest school board members, there's Northwest school ballots that are still in this area here that will need to be combined with those in Northeast Hall County. So that's why Resurrection Catholic Church was selected for those rural voters. Resurrection Catholic Church is also one of the several new polling sites that was added in because of the substantial growth of Grand Island's population. Other new polling sites include Southern Public Power Offices and Abundant Life Church. Some polling places were moved to enhance Americans with Disabilities, accessibility, and curbside voting. First Faith Methodist Church and St. Paul's Lutheran Church were added in for ADA reasons, along with Resurrection Catholic Church. Seedling Mile Elementary will cease to be a polling site out of the interest of school security, and also school traffic has been a problem for voters. So we're making that move to get out of the public schools. Voters in that area will now be voting at Grace Lutheran Church, which also has a brand new automatic door opener into the polling site. As part of the accessibility improvements, a county and state grant program was used to add automatic door openers to Grace Lutheran Church, Fauner Park Cafe, Calvary Lutheran Church, First Christian Church, Southern Public Power Offices, First Baptist Church in Cairo, and the Alda Community Center. So along with all of these location changes come some of the most progressive accessibility changes for Hall County voters since the Americans with Disabilities Act was approved and passed more than 30 years ago. I applaud our polling place partners in being open to these upgrades that will not only serve Hall County voters on the 2 election days, but will also serve the community at large for the 363 other days of the year. And I will note too that with these finances and improvements that we're making to the polling sites, we're spending more than $20,000 in ADA upgrades to Hall County polling sites for the 2022 election. Every Hall County voter will also be mailed a new voter card in March. Whether or not there's been a change in their polling place, they're going to get this new card. We're sending out more than 34,000 postcards to all voters so they'll know their polling place, as well as any changes in political representation, such as a new city council ward or a new school board ward. That information is also available on Nebraska Voter Check, and it does provide the language options so people will be able to know what city council ward, what school board ward they're in. Voters also have the option to request a mailed ballot. So if they don't like the polling site, if it's inconvenient, you can request a mailed ballot, or you can vote early here in this hallway outside of the Hall County Election Office. Early voting will start on April 11th. It will run until the day before the election on May 9th. Get on Nebraska Voter Check, find your polling place. We want everyone who wants to vote to be able to do so. Some of the other notable changes here for voters, people who vote at St. Leo's Catholic Church, that legislative line was moved from Highway 34 up to Stolly Park Road. So that precinct that we had has essentially been cut in half. People who voted at St. Leo's and live south of Stolly Park Road will still vote at St. Leo's. People who voted at St. Leo's and live on the north side of Stolly Park Road will now be moved to a new polling site at Abundant Life Church. The Fauner Park Cafe had 2 precincts voting in it for the last 10 years. Those have been separated. Those people who voted at Fauner Park who lived in Grand Island city limits will still be voting at Fauner Park. Those people who were voting at Fauner Park Cafe and lived outside of city limits by and large will now either be voting at St. Leo's or in Alda. Northridge Assembly of God has been divided. That will no longer be a polling site. About 2/3 of those voters will be at First Faith Methodist, and about 1/3 of those will go to Resurrection. There's been some school district changes. So this area in Precinct 20, this part of Precinct 22, a lot of these people south of the interstate here used to vote in Donovan. And they will no longer be voting in Doniphan, they will be voting in Wood River. If you live south of the interstate and you're part of the Wood River School District or you're part of the Kennesaw School District, you'll be voting in Wood River. We have divided this up by school district so we're not sending ballots, the same ballot faces, to two different sites. So people in Doniphan who vote in Doniphan will be part of the Doniphan School District, the Aurora School District, or Adams Central School District. Kennesaw, Wood River will go to Wood River, and Shelton will go to Wood River as well. The Cairo Precinct is a little bit larger. The legislative line used to be on 80th Road. They moved it to Engelman Road. So this is getting larger, and we moved it a little further south, again, to consolidate ballot faces with school district. In the last election, we had 125 different ballot faces. We have 116 now. We were going to be under 100, and then there were some changes with public power that added some splits back in. But we're a little more efficient. So there's a lot of things that go into these changes, primarily driven from redistricting and also accessibility issues. So does anybody have any questions for me?
What was your biggest challenge as you kind of redistrict?
Well, I think the biggest challenge was really fitting in with the legislative lines, because they really made some substantial changes. And again, taking a population or a community the size of Grand Island and dividing it three ways and not three equal ways was challenging to fit in for the precincts. And I'm disappointed that we do have Grand Island voters who are going to have to vote in ALDA. It's something that we did testify against, both the city and this office, to the legislature, and redistricting is a monumental task. The legislature obviously had time constraints, and they did a lot of work, they did a lot of heavy lifting in a short amount of time, but at the end of the day, there's still changes that we all have to get used to. I'm going to bring this computer up, and I want to show you the Nebraska Voter Check is a site that we've had in place for a number of years. It's run through the Secretary of State's office, and besides finding a polling place, it's a great tool for voters because they can also follow their ballot on Nebraska Voter Check. If you get a mailed ballot, you can find when your ballot has been processed, when it's been mailed. You can also see on this website when it's come back in and if it's been accepted or rejected. Sometimes when we first get them back, they may be rejected because someone forgot to put a signature on them. So we will call voters, but they can also follow their ballot on this website. On Nebraska Voter Check, you can see there's two different ways that people can look up. They can look up by putting their name in, and I'm going to put my name in here and I'll just show you. It asks for first and last name and county. And then when you hit look up, it will tell where your polling place is. My polling place is St. Mary's Annex. So you can also look up by address. So if you're helping someone else, or if you just want to see if a neighborhood has changed, you can put in an address. I'll put in my address here. If I can spell it correctly. All right, so there's my address. And it's going to bring up St. Mary's as well. The additional information that comes up by using an address rather than just searching by your name, it also has what's called districts. And if you click on districts down here, that's where you will find my mouse here. It will have all of your information on your political representation, your school board ward, your city council ward, all of that information. But that's only if you look up by address, not by name. So people can get that information as well, particularly if they're considering running for office and they're not sure what district they're in, they can get that information there. So two of the really positive things about these changes, again, we've got some of the most progressive ADA accessibility changes that we've had in our polling sites probably since ADA came into effect 30 years ago, more than 30 years ago. And the other thing is, Hall County is done with redistricting, and all this information is available not only to people considering running for office, but to voters in general. Not all other Nebraska counties can say that. There's a lot of Nebraska counties that are still doing their redistricting work. So I'm really proud that our political subdivisions in Hall County did their line drawing quickly, got us that information. We've got it all inputted into the database, and it's available for people. So the message here today, again, is nearly 40% of Hall County voters have different polling sites for 2022. You can find your polling site at Nebraska Voter Check. Okay.
Tracy, did I hear you that in some cases people may drive past a polling site to get to their polling site?
That is true. I mean, that's something that we try to avoid when we set up a polling site. So a precinct is a geographic area in the community that has about 1,500 voters. And ideally, the polling place would be in the center of the 1,500. When you're looking for public facilities, it doesn't always come in the center. So sometimes you are driving past a polling site to get to your own. We have made sure that all of our polling sites are within their precinct boundaries this time. That didn't happen in the past, but that is the case now. But particularly for rural voters, they will be driving past other polling sites likely to get to their polling site. Those northeast Hall County voters that are coming to Resurrection Church will probably have to drive by other polling sites to get to their own site.
And this will also probably be the first election I can think of where not a single school facility has been used.
There is one school still in use. It is a private school,
Okay.
Heartland Lutheran. We considered getting out of Heartland Lutheran as well, and actually they requested that we remain in their school. They like to have Election Day as part of a training for their students, and they actually had put in a new ADA door, and we're looking forward to having us utilize the school. We will be moving out of their library into their gym, though, to do the voting. So that will be a new location still on the same site at Heartland Lutheran, but all of the public schools, we are now out of all of the public schools.
And come May and even November, what do you anticipate the biggest challenges being for the office?
Well, I think a big challenge is going to be just getting and making sure that more than 13,000 people are headed the right direction on Election Day. So we've got this message that's going to be coming out over the next 90 days in media. We have different groups that we've talked to that are going to be helping us get the message out, visiting with folks at grocery stores, putting out door hangers, this kind of thing. But I really want people to pay attention to that and keep in mind and plan now because we can't answer 13,000 phone calls on Election Day. So you need to plan ahead. That we're just not able to take that volume of phone calls. But there's a lot of tools, online, printed maps, people in the community that want to help our voters because it's very important to us that everyone's voice is heard in the election.
Would you expect a lot of people to vote by mail? Maybe not to the extent of 2 years ago, but do you think that's going to be a trend?
So in the 2020 election, we had 80% of people in the primary voted by mail and 20% went to polling sites. And in the general election, it was almost 50-50. 50% of voters were at the polling site, 50% were voting early. I think we'll continue to see very strong, high numbers. Typically, before the pandemic, we had 20% of our voters would vote early. And that stabilized, I think, a little bit in the general election of November of 2020 with that 50%. And I think we'll probably be in the 40 to 50% range of having voters vote early, either by mail or coming down to the election office and voting early in that month ahead of the election, simply because it's convenient for people.
With all these changes, do you anticipate a need for office staff leading up to the election as well as poll workers on Election Day?
We do have a need for office staff. We're booking now for office staff that will be coming in, temp staff that comes in March. And we will absolutely need additional poll workers because we have additional polling sites. We have 3 new polling sites that we're going to be staffing, and so we're going to need more workers. So if anyone wants to be a part of an election, it's very interesting, and I think it would be very enlightening for a lot of folks as well. Fewer than 1% of the population ever sees the backside of an election, and so this is really a great community service, and it's also paid. You don't get paid a lot on election day, but it is a fun, enlightening opportunity that people can partake in, and we're taking those applications now as well. And we're also taking applications for the early voting. So if you want by mail, we've got applications there in front of our early voting window. People can stop by and pick those up. They'll be in the paper. They'll be in the media. They're also on our website, and so people have lots of different ways that they can get ready to vote. And again, the primary election will be May 10th, and the November election, November 8th, the general election on November 8th.
Final question. Even with the kind of mix up in precincts and everything, it's still, what is kind of your message to voters who are like, maybe I'll just sit this election out, or just because I don't want to spend the extra time?
Right. No, we never want anybody to sit an election out. There are a lot of really important decisions in the 2022 election. It's a midterm election. It's not a presidential election, but we have the Nebraska governor's race is on the 2022 ballot. All of the state's constitutional officers, most of the officers for Hall County, half of the Grand Island City Council, the mayor, half of the Wood River City Council, 5 of 9 Grand Island School Board members, half of the Wood River School Board. I mean, there are a lot of really important decisions for voters to make. It's never a good time to sit out an election, never. So people need to make plans now, find your polling place, or decide if you're voting early how you're going to do that, by mail or by coming early, and make your plans now because we want everyone's voice to be heard May 10th.